Hi, everyone. This is Karen Oakham with Max Huskins. He's going to be behind the scenes for this special episode, which we are doing with Will Rollins. He's the out gay candidate running for the congressional seat 41 in Palm Springs. That district is currently being represented by a Trump fanboy named Ken Calvert. Calvert is now trying to rework his record and make himself appear that he's suddenly pro LGBTQ when his voting record says exactly the opposite. We're doing this special because it's so important to elect Will Rollins. I endorse him. I hope you do too. We need him in Palm Springs, the LGBTQist city in America. He is brilliant. He is just, his character is such that you can trust him, and he will represent us. Hi, Will Rollins. Welcome back, and thank you for coming back. This is a particularly difficult time right now as we're doing this interview because, and I want to get your reaction right off the top. As you probably have heard, uh, someone burst into Nancy Pelosi's home in San Francisco and violently beat up her husband with a hammer. He's expected to survive, but I mean, when we're talking about democracy at stake at these midterms, this is what we're talking about. These individual terrorists, these lone terrorists have been unleashed. So, what's your response to what's happened this morning?
I mean, it's horrifying. And I just think about what it must have been like for Paul Pelosi to be sitting there in his house, right? And have somebody in the middle of the night or, come in and scream, "Where's your spouse?" And then attack him with a hammer. It's a horrifying thought. And it just confirms how horrific the rise in political violence and extremism has been in the United States over the last 6 years. And our democracy cannot function if our leaders and their families aren't safe. And so I am so sorry to the speakers and her family. I'm thinking about them. It's a horrible event, and it's one that really should unite Americans across party lines to condemn this kind of political violence. And just thinking about, I mean, these are grandparents, the speaker and her husband are grandparents. They're in their early 80s, and it's somebody who went after these grandparents. And it's just it's a horrifying moment for the country, and it is a stark reminder of just how much we really need to step up protecting our democracy and the people who are trying to lead it, who are in public service, who are doing hard jobs, and who do not deserve to have their families targeted when they're trying to serve the country.
And Will, you're running in a district that has been redistricted to now include Palm Springs, LGBTQ Palm Springs, the gayest city in America, as it were. And yet your opponent is anti-LGBTQ, is Republican, the face of family values, and he supports Trump, who unleashed all of this. I mean, have you heard from your opponent? I mean, what do you think is happening with this family values crew that has unleashed this horror?
Well, he's refused to debate me in any public forum. He's refused to engage in candidate forums. He sent hecklers after me. He sends a tracker to follow me around and ask me questions, but he never shows up to confront me face to face. And he's also been trying to erase and lie about his record. And this was somebody who, again, after January 6th, voted to overturn the election, even after the speaker has had her life or her family's life at risk, God knows how many times over the past several years. But you think about all of the members of Congress who had the vice president whose lives were at risk on January 6th, and the reaction of people like Ken Calvert to that event after they had violently stormed the Capitol. And then even after it became clear that 5 cops had died as a result of the attack, he calls for dropping charges. That is unequivocally wrong.
U.S. Congressman Ken Calvert has also appeared on that show. Representative Calvert served parts of western Riverside County, but after the new redistricting, he could represent parts of western Coachella Valley as well, including Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, and Palm Desert. He joined Pastor Tim back in August of 2021 and had this to say about the January 6th attack.
My heart yearns for that day where the truth comes out. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that coming out really, really soon.
Hopefully sooner than later. I think that that's going to happen, and I think a lot of the people that have been unfortunately, I think unfortunately charged will be released here. I mean, or the charges dropped, I hope, relatively soon.
It's not all talk. Hours after insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, Calvert voted to overturn the 2020 election results. He also signed an amicus brief asking the Supreme Court to overturn the results in 4 states. He's also voted against holding an independent commission to investigate what happened on January 6th. Now, we did reach out to Representative Calvert and his team for comment. They have not responded.
True leadership, regardless of party, requires condemning political violence. This is the United States. We cannot allow our country to slide into autocracy, authoritarianism, where this kind of violent rhetoric and enabling behavior is tolerated, right? It's the saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. And you cannot enable and affirmatively go out there and vote against even a committee, for example, to investigate what happened afterwards. And, you know, it's part of a pattern with him where he's taken all of these steps that are provable facts. They are in the historic record. You can look this up. It's written down what his votes are. It's written down and recorded what his public comments were when he said, I'm looking forward to the day when the charges against these people will hopefully be dropped. He said that in August of 2021. Recently in newspapers, he's been claiming that he's always condemned political violence. That's a lie. And it's recorded. And he's doing the same thing with his record on LGBTQ rights. And what the Republicans like him are relying on is that you, the voter, will be so fatigued from the last 6 years, from a disbelief and cynicism and any ability to sort through facts, that you won't call him out or understand that he's lying. And unfortunately, sometimes the press doesn't always catch him on it, right? And it's a big problem in our democracy, because if we can't rely on actual facts, and if these guys can just walk back their records, it becomes really difficult for voters to know how to respond.
Well, and what's curious to me, I'm old enough to remember when Palm Springs was, a getaway that featured Gerald and Betty Ford, for heaven's sake. And as you probably, well, you may be too young to remember this, but Betty Ford really did a lot for the LGBTQ community. She was honored by APLA's commitment to life. And I mean, there was a rapprochement, if you will. There was the Republicans in the Palm Springs area were not these kinds of Republicans. I mean, I remember Sonny Bono, then I remember Mary Bono. And the thing about Mary Bono is, of course, she had an LGBT person in her family, Chaz, who she loved and welcomed. We're not seeing that.
Well, the good news is people in Palm Springs, and I think really across the entire congressional district, are seeing through the load of BS that Calvert is trying to feed them. And so we've got a huge lead in early returns in the ballots in Palm Springs. And a lot of Republicans have supported me in this congressional race because they also know that Calvert is lying to them about his record. And so when you have somebody who voted against the Matthew Shepard hate crimes bill, which Ken Calvert did recently, somebody who voted against the Equality Act just last year, which is a law designed to protect gay people from being fired or kicked out of their homes for employment, basic employment and housing anti-discrimination rules. That's not somebody who's evolved in the last 14, 16 months, right? It's somebody who is pandering now because he is scared about losing his seat. And the reason he wants to keep his seat is because power has been incredibly lucrative for him. And we've talked about, you can look at the public finance disclosures, his net worth has increased up to $20 million since he first took office in 1992. And how has he done that? Well, he's used our tax dollars and inside information to fund his own private real estate investments. And even Fox News has done a 7-minute segment talking about Ken Calvert's abuse of power and earmarks to benefit his own personal investments. This is widely reported on both conservative and left-leaning media outlets have covered this guy's corruption. And I will tell you, the thing that really strikes across party lines is this desire to fight against the kind of systemic corruption that is really embodied by my opponent. And the truth too is that Southern California has come a long way in LGBTQ rights, and a lot of moderate Republicans have family members, right, who are LGBTQ. They themselves may be LGBTQ, and that when you see somebody who is transparently lying about where they actually stand on the issue, because you can go look at their recent votes on our rights, it's disingenuous. And I think people actually would have more respect for him if he just came out and said flat out, I don't think being gay is okay. And I believe that because of whatever the reason is that he believes that, at least he would be honest about it. But I think people sort of see him hiding that, and it makes it clear that he just can't be trusted on any of our issues. And he's doing the same thing, frankly, with women's rights as well.
Well, and that brings up a very important point, which is if he's reelected and you're not elected, we face the possibility of a national "Don't Say Gay" bill. I don't know what it was like for you coming out, but it was rather difficult for me. And having a national "Don't Say Gay" bill where your congressional representative says he's against you, as opposed to somebody like you who says, I'm with you, I'm one of you, and not only that, be your best self, is just is hurtful. I don't think we're thinking that far in advance to realize the impact this might have. I understand you spoke with a bunch of children recently. Certainly there might be LGBTQ or questioning kids among those kids that you talk to. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I've loved getting out there and talking to high school kids about running for office and what prompted me to do it and my own experience. And something I always talk about with those kids is how I ended up working in national security, because for me, that goes back to high school, and it goes back to the first class of the day that I had at the time, which was Model UN, and it was September 11th, 2001. I was a junior, and we watched as the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. And I was still closeted when that happened, but thought about enlisting in the US military because the images from that day really shook me to my core, as they did so many of us. And I thought about enlisting, but I had a government at the time that said, there's something defective about who you are. And that's why we don't want you to tell anybody that you're gay if you want to serve. It made me concerned, right? It makes you think internally just how if the government is telling you that there's something wrong with you, it affects your psyche, it affects your self-esteem, it affects your own sense of self-worth, right? And that's why I'm so committed to ending that kind of legalized discrimination. And I think it's unfortunate that the Republican Party has taken the opposite approach, right? Which is almost like they're going back 60, 70 years in time to this concept of, well, being gay is a choice. And so if we just tell people not to say the word gay, there won't be any more gay people. I mean, it's a truly remarkably retrograde, disgusting, and ignorant view of humanity. And make no mistake, Calvert's going to vote for that bill. He votes for what leadership tells him to do. And we've seen his record out there in history on LGBTQ rights. And, as I've been telling people again and again, it's really not just the morally right thing to do to treat people equally, no matter who they love or what they look like. But for the United States and our economy and our military, it is also the right thing to do. And it's how we compete in the 21st century, by attracting talent, by letting people achieve their full human potential, by letting people know there is no limit to what you can achieve. You can rise and fall based on merit. It's all about merit. And when the government puts in those artificial rules that say there's something defective about you as a human being, that suppresses talent. It suppresses our ability to attract people who want to compete here in the United States. And I've had a lot of success talking to business owners about that, right? Who relate to it because they want to hire talented people. And they've seen, and educators who know that when kids feel okay with themselves, they do better in school, right? And there's just, it's as I was joking the other day, you know, saying the word gay 3 times in a row is not going to actually make you gay, but maybe it can save you some money on your car insurance. You know, it's like, it's just an idiotic policy. And I think the vast majority of Americans understand that what they're pushing has, and it also has nothing to do with the economy from their perspective, right? I mean, how does banning the word gay in school do anything to lower your costs, to lower inflation, to lower your prescription drug out-of-pocket costs? It doesn't. They have zero plan for actually fixing the economy. And so they're focused on these wedge issues that pander to a base that the vast majority of us just don't want anything to do with.
Amen. So do you have something that you want to say directly to your voters as kind of a closing argument, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to reject the false choice that the Republicans have tried to ask you to make in this election. They're asking you to decide between it's either the economy or you can protect our democracy. It's either the economy or you can protect women's reproductive freedom. It's either the economy or you can protect LGBTQ kids. It is all of those things. And electing people like Ken Calvert to represent you would invite unmitigated disaster across the board. And when they want to talk about the economy, we should take them at their word. Because if you think inflation is bad now, just look what happens when they force the United States to default on its debt in order to slash Social Security and Medicare, in order to give even more tax cuts to corporations and ultra wealthy people, all of which economists have said will only amplify inflation. And so we need smart, thoughtful leaders who are actually going to focus on substantive policy to get the economy back to a place where it actually needs to be for working families. And if you're going to talk about how inflation is at a 40-year high, you've got to talk about how corporate profits are at a 50-year high, and how 50% of the reason that we've got these inflationary costs has to do with that kind of price gouging that has been so widely reported in the media. And you need to have folks in Congress who are going to step up to those and stand up to those corporations, because if you have people who are in their pockets, they aren't going to do anything to put more in your own wallet. And we need that kind of leadership right now in Washington, D.C.
And we need more and more people to have Nancy Pelosi's back.
Yes, we do. And you know, on that last point, I mean, again, political violence in the United States cannot happen. And no matter which party you belong to, we really need to rethink how we are funding security for our elected officials and also for our judges, right? There have been a string of really violent attacks on elected members of Congress, on judges and their families. And we cannot survive as a democracy unless our judiciary, our legislative branch, our executive branch, unless those people are safe while they're doing their jobs for us. So we've got to take a real close look at that in the next Congress.
Well, and election workers now, poll workers now. I mean, the fact that they are being attacked and intimidated with people wearing masks and guns. I mean, this is beyond the ken. This is something I can't fathom.
Absolutely right. And that those elections are they're happening now already, right? The early returns are already happening. Those poll places are already open. There already are election workers putting their lives on the line to try to make our democracy work. And we absolutely have to keep those people safe and have local and federal law enforcement there to make sure that they are secure when they're doing their jobs and just counting ballots.
And we might add that this is said by a person who specializes in national security. So
yes, and yeah, and that's right. And you know, seeing those threats from the other side and working with the FBI and dealing with those threats and trying to protect our communities from domestic extremism, I can tell you that it is an urgent moment and it matters when leaders step up and unite and condemn this kind of political violence and fund the kind of defense that we need for our poll workers, our elected leaders, our judges. So I look forward to doing that when I'm elected.
As you can see for yourselves, Will Rollins is a man of character. He's smart, and he would do very well representing us, representing California District 41. And in particular, we need him in Congress at this time because he's all about national security. He also knows about reaching across the aisle and how to work on a bipartisan basis to get things done, which we sorely need. Please elect Will Rollins. Thank you very much. See you in the next episode.